would like the ship to go. Now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discussing Trek. And with me today, I have none other than Brent Black from Con the Musical, a Parody Trek-tacular. We're going to get into that, but first, I want to know more about Brent Black.
Wow, where to start? I kind of am one of those, what do you call them, multi-hyphenates. I make, comedy stuff, theater, music, songs, video games, and dad jokes. I don't even have kids. So, but you gotta, if you have the dad joke style, it doesn't really matter. And I've been doing just weird, I don't know, I've been making weird stuff that I think is funny or interesting for, a couple decades now. It's been kind of what I do. I really, I feel like somebody asked me on a plane, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh man, that's a really big question. Yeah. That's a little taste what I just said, but feel free to ask me to get more specific.
Yeah, so I've read that you've been doing this for over 15 years. I've perused your YouTube page. You've been around for a long time on YouTube. Comedian, musician, video game developer. Let's dive into that comedy part just a little bit. How did you actually get into comedy?
I think that it was just very circuitous because I did funny stuff growing up. I made funny little videos and I wrote little plays and stuff that were funny. But if people think of me as being in comedy, it's probably because I started making funny videos on YouTube, and then that brand became a live performance brand. That sounds very corporate. What I really mean is I made silly jokes about video games on YouTube, and people said, would you like to do that on a stage in a bar? That kind of thing. So whereas in high school, it would have been like hosting a talent show and making up jokes and working the crowd. That same kind of energy was now used to do live shows that were kind of tied to my YouTube. I say brand. I made funny videos about video games that used the music from those games. So there's nostalgia, there's satire, there's jokes that people get if they played any video game, but then there's jokes that you get only if you played that game. And so, I consider, to the extent that I'm in comedy, which is a thing that I kind of I'm almost uncomfortable saying, because I know and have lived with multiple stand-up comedians, and it's they're in comedy. I'm on YouTube and appear live. But yeah, it's just sort of making things that are allegedly funny and then people liking them. That's how I got into comedy, and the rest is history.
Where does your comedic sensibility come from? Is there a particular movie that one could reference and be like, okay, I get your style. I clock your style now?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I definitely was born in 1984. So by the time I was really cutting my comedy teeth, it was stuff like early 90s SNL. I think about Mike Myers, Wayne's World, Austin Powers, but also musically, you've got stuff like Weird Al, because I do a lot of parody music, but that reaches all the way back to Spike Jonze, who we know now Spike Jonze is a director of music videos, but there was another Spike Jonze in the 40s who had an orchestra, and he went around with his orchestra doing parody versions of songs that were on the radio, and they were weird and they were funny, and so I was into that kind of thing as a kid, just going to the library, finding weird CDs and getting into that kind of stuff. There's a lot of a musical theater sensibility, kind of like vaudeville and Borscht Belt, going way, way back. Old school stuff that still, if you go to a Broadway show, even if they're making modern jokes, the sort of rhythms of that still apply. And you definitely will see that in Con the Musical. But yeah, my sensibility, I don't know, there's a subversiveness. There's almost like a problem with authority and a problem with, you know what I mean? There's a slight, wanting not to follow the rules about it. But also, I don't know, my work can sometimes have a certain cynicism and a certain rough edge to it, but I really like making people laugh and making them have a good time. And when I'm lucky, doing stuff like Con and stuff like, Brent Floss on YouTube, finding the part of you that loves the fandom you're in, finding the true squishy fan inside of you in a way that involves laughter, laughing at the thing you love and kind of laughing at yourself. It's a really special feeling. And I didn't really appreciate that that's what I was doing for a long time until I'd been doing it long enough to sit back and go like, what is it about this? And so I think like at this point, a sensibility that ties it all together, including Con, is helping people find what's fun and weird about their fandom, but also about themselves through comedy.
Yeah, I've been looking through your YouTube channel. You're like a geek culture powerhouse. You you cover it all, man. I was actually surprised by the amount of different video games and things you've either made a song about or talked about on your YouTube channel. It's pretty amazing. You do have 459K subscribers, 321 videos on Brent Floss, which is your YouTube channel. So let's dive a little bit into the music part of that, because that seems like that's a tremendous part of who you are. I've browsed your albums on Spotify and tried to listen to as many songs as I could. What instruments do you actually play? Do you play instruments?
I do. I play piano most like prominently, but I technically can do guitar and I technically can do drums. But the way technology has changed, you know, the fact that I haven't done a whole lot of live performance of music in a long time, it's really mostly these days MIDI keyboard input. So I play the drums, but I play them really well with my fingers on the keys.
Yeah.
If you try to get me on a drum set, I'm like, oh, forearms. I forgot about this. Yeah, like mallet percussion, pretty much all kinds of percussion, and piano are the things that I play. But through the magic of digital arrangement and MIDI arrangement, if I put it all in through a keyboard, I can reassign it, arrange it, make this instrument, that instrument. And in so doing, even like when you're playing a MIDI keyboard to input for different instruments, you're playing the keyboard differently. You know, to make it sound a little bit like a saxophone, you have to think a little bit more like, well, how does that instrument interact with itself to make those noises? So, in short, it's just keyboard, but it's a little bit more through the magic of modern technology.
How did you learn to play? How long have you been playing?
It's funny. The song My Girl by The Temptations was in the trailer for a movie called My Girl with Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah.
And
sad movie.
Sad movie. Weird part of my origin story. But I was like 7 or 8 years old and I saw that trailer and the song My Girl was in it, and I just went right into my sister's room. She had a little, like, one of those toy pianos that's got, like, I don't know, like 16 keys. And I just started working out how to play, I guess you'd say. And, like, I don't know why I did that. I often wonder, like, what if I hadn't have done that? No one really pushed me toward the piano, but, like, that for my next birthday, I was like, can I have a keyboard? Turns out my grandma played a little piano, and then my grandpa on the other side played a little bit of piano. So like I just had a lucky, and neither of them gave me lessons, but one taught me this and one taught me that. And I had a lot of great video game music I was listening to all the time. So that's what I would go and try to figure out how to play. And, you know, like this, like no form, no technique. But as I continued to grow up, you know, like it was almost like my parents knew maybe they would slightly mess something up if they put me into lessons. They were like, this is like his favorite toy. He just doesn't understand that it's not a toy. It's like, it's a discipline and it's an instrument. We'll just let him keep doing this. So I figured out chord progressions and I figured out all kinds of stuff. I played keyboard in a band in high school. And so like there are definitely, you know, I'm self-taught. And because of that, there are a lot of holes in my education. Like my hands to this day are not healthy in the way that I play. You're supposed to have these nice, flat, beautiful kind of piano hands. And I'm like, you know, dinosaur claws when I play. But that's like the way I learned, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, self-taught, but still learning every day and still wishing that I had learned to sight read. If you're gonna learn an instrument as a kid, you have a sponge brain. Just take advantage of it and learn to sight read while you can, because it's never going to be easier.
So your music is heavily, heavily geek influenced. As also a child of the 80s and 90s, I you seem like you were hitting like the who's who of all of the geek things that I know and loved and grew up with. So is it video games, geek culture, both? Like, talk about how you kind of use that in your music and where the genesis of that is. I know you spoke of, chopping it out on your piano or your keyboard when you were younger, but what made you really dive into it more and, even give lyrics to songs that, are just music alone?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so like we've established, I played, video game music on my keyboard. Eventually I got keyboards that could do arranging or multi-track recording. So you put it on the bass instrument and you record that. You put it on the piano instrument and you record the piano over the bass you just did. And so even like in 8th or 9th grade, I was able to arrange multiple instrument things. And it was all probably, if you listen to it now, probably very embarrassing and clunky, but I was figuring that stuff out. Well, one of the things I figured out how to do was do arrangements and remixes of the video game music. So as we're moving through high school and into college, the learning how to arrange and orchestrate, but also trying it out with video game music, it's all kind of like every step of me growing as a musician had video game music as a part of it somewhere marbled in. And so then I started writing musicals in high school, then wrote a few in college, and went to grad school for musical theater writing at NYU, which is the weirdest, strangest, like, it's like going to Hogwarts. But so I get a degree in that, but then suddenly I'm making money by teaching kids to write musical theater. So I'm in the middle of this tiny town in Oklahoma, where they've got a very well-funded arts center. And every day I'm teaching kids music and lyrics, and like it's totally steeped in my head. And I just get one of these old classic tunes in my head that I'd known for a million years, that I had learned on the keyboard as a kid, that I had arranged a remix of in high school and another one in college. Mega Man 3, 1990, Capcom NES. The opening, like intro theme to Mega Man 3, just I consider it to be, Mozart level, Beatles level, iconic. And I had nothing better to do because I was teaching 3 hours a day and like in, like the guest house of my bosses. And I just started writing some lyrics to the Mega Man 3, intro tune. And there wasn't like a plan. There wasn't like this is how I will become famous. Like it was just like a silly kind of pass the time thing to do. I had at that point a new MacBook that had like iMovie editing software in it. And I just kind of spent all night just making this silly song. I recorded some lyrics. I slap it together. It's very, very rudimentary. It's like one step up from Microsoft Paint. But like this video was just a fun, silly lark. And just like all the other YouTube stuff I was doing at the time, I was just trying stuff to see what could get me attention. And that one got a lot of views. And so, having a lot of student loan debt, and a degree that really is only as valuable as what you can make with it. Because nobody hires you because you got a master's in musical theater writing. You know what I'm saying? Nobody goes, that's the exact thing we're looking for.
Yeah.
So you can only, you know what I mean? The piece of paper doesn't matter. What you learned and what your skills are now are what matters. So yeah, I just went, well, people seem to like this. I'll make another one, and I'll make another one, and I'll make another one. And suddenly about a year later, I'm doing live appearances, still making no money off of it, really. But once the album came out, which I worked on for a couple years, once that came out in 2010, it became like a full-time job. Soon after that, YouTube actually let me monetize. It's funny to think of a time when YouTube would not allow you to put ads on your
Early
videos,
days.
whereas now it's like you have to take a step to not have ads on your videos. Anyway, so it wasn't like a eureka moment. It was just, this is why I tell students and people who ask me like, how do I this? How do I that? How do I get into this? It's like, you just have to try stuff that's interesting to you. Just don't judge your ideas. They might be stupid. Many of them will be stupid. And you'll hopefully know before you show anybody else. But like, try it, because sometimes your idea turns out to be something that you didn't even realize how much people would enjoy it or how significant it would be to other people. So yeah, that's the story of how I got into writing lyrics for video game music.
How's your YouTube journey been from then to now?
some people say I'm a former YouTuber. I say I'm a recovering YouTuber, because that's a joke, by the way. Here's the thing is, YouTube was like, I first started in 2006. I first got on the map with that lyrics video in 2008. And so even though that's not quite like first wave, it's not like, 144p. It is early. It really was like right as people started to, like, basically it was like people in their basements with like 144p Logitech webcam videos. That was like first wave, and nobody knew, and there was, 2008 was when I think a certain additional group of people started to catch on that this could be something. But still, nobody thought of it as a job. Nobody knew. I mean, I remember even like in 2011, I would dread someone on a plane being like, someone, a boomer on a plane being like, so what do you do? Because you tell them, and then they're going to interrogate you about like, how do you make money? Or like, okay, but what's your real job? But then when you finally get them to understand it is a real job, now they want to watch your videos, and you're like, I didn't see this coming. Oh no. Like, I don't really want to show this person my jokes about Mario's butt, like on a plane. So as far as my YouTube journey, I mean, I'm very grateful for the right place, right time of it. I think that even a year later, I would have had a different journey. I think that also the stuff that I do isn't really optimized for like the contemporary YouTube algorithm. I mean, putting 50 to 100 hours of work into a 3-minute music video is not how things work nowadays. Nowadays, I mean, I don't have to tell you, like, it's much more about like crank out as much as possible, as fast as possible. And recency and frequency are so much more important. Whereas at that time, it's like, if I can crank out a fun music video about a video game people like, average every 3 to 5 weeks, and, release the MP3 along with it on iTunes or whatever, which also made you more money at the time. Because on iTunes, they had to buy the track for $1 instead of now we're like, they have to listen to it, probably 13,000 times, and then you get $1. But anyway, so like, I still consider myself a YouTuber, and like in 2020 I had nothing better to do. So I did like a 6-month season where I went back and did like regular videos, 2 uploads a week. But for me, it was a good way to get where I am now. And it's an audience I'll never leave behind, even if I'm not really making regular videos. So yeah, I feel a little wayward. I feel a little bit like, I don't know if I'm cut out for TikTok. I don't even know if I'm cut out for modern YouTube. Notice how like, instead of going forward, I went like, okay, I'm going to do YouTube for a while. Now I'm going to go back to musical theater, which is 100 years old. Anyway, it's an interesting journey. It's not over, but the intensity of it kind of rose and kind of fell. That was, I mean, I could talk a lot about the emotional journey of that and everything, but let us just say I am mostly just grateful for how it led to me to be able to make video games, make con, and to the extent that I can go forward in entertainment or creativity, the luck that I had with YouTube and the audience that I was able to cultivate and that supported me there are always going to be a part of that. And yeah. Well,
you obviously, started YouTube, got popular doing these music videos or videos with lyrics, and it even transitioned to an actual video game. And we'll get into a con right after this, but I want to briefly talk about your video game that you did in 2016.
So I raised the money in 2016 and we came out with it in 2017. Basically, so I had played this game in 2004 called Quip It, which was like a pretty clunky DVD-based party game. You put in the DVD and your remote lets you go through this game that was kind of like Jackbox. When we think about the Jackbox party packs, it was like an early version trying to be like that. It wasn't great, but it had like, caption this kind of things in it and finish this sentence, fill in the blank. And I loved playing it, even though like it would let you skip a prompt or a question. We would skip most of them, because they weren't very good, but then a good one would happen. So, okay, that's step one. Step two is MagFest is a convention that I still go to every year. It's, music and gaming is what MAG stands for. And in 2015, I was stuck there because it was so snowy, I could not get my bus back to New York. So a couple of us just got like a hotel room and just like people on the floor, people on, you know what I mean? Like just like waiting to go home. And somebody brought out this game that was like the Jackbox Party Pack, or maybe it was just You Don't Know Jack. I forget. But it was like the first game I had ever seen where you could play on your phone as a controller while watching the game on a TV. And I went, man, if you could do that, you could like take a game like Quip It, but actually make it good. And so I teamed up with a buddy of mine, Julian Spillane, who was at the time pretty seasoned, but is now an extremely seasoned video game dev. And I pitched it to him, and he was like, I'm not sure I get it. And I was like, okay, wait, let me make you a video. Because that's what I could do. I couldn't, make a good game design doc, but I was like, let me make you a video of what it would look like. And then when I did, he was like, I get it. Let's do this. I'm in. And I think 2 weeks after he and I shook hands on that, Jackbox announced Quiplash, which was their first like comedy Jackbox game, which I kind of went like, okay, that was a bit of a facepalm moment, but it was good because it made us go, we have to make really sure whatever they're doing with Quiplash, which they had only announced it, like we have to make this very much its own thing. Whatever that is, this has to be unique. So yeah, like my good friend Kate Adicott, a marketing genius, was like, why don't you call it Use Your Words? Which was like, yes, because looking back, our ideas for it, we were going to call it Snark Attack or like Strategist or Joker Face. It's kind of like, just sometimes you look back and like, you can't believe what almost happened. That's one of those. But so yeah, we worked on it. We worked to get a prototype going. And about a year later, we kickstarted it. And about a year after that, we released it on all consoles. It took a little while to get it on all consoles. But now we are on the precipice of Use Your Words 2. And this has been a trickier process because it's been a smaller team making a bigger game. So it's taken a little bit longer. But we kickstarted that in 2022. And we still don't have a release date, but I'm saying Q4. Q4 2022. So close we can taste it, but not ready for a release date. But yeah, so I think in the context of all this stuff, I think that for me, it was cool to make a video game that's like backwards comedy. It's like, instead of me making the jokes, it's like, what if, so the philosophy of it is the party game for funny people and their unfunny friends. And it's like, what if there was a game that made people that are anxious about the idea of being put on the spot and don't want to like be forced to make a joke? Like, what if there was a game that made them feel like safe to do that, the way that you feel safe with your best friend making a joke that even if you or your best friend aren't really that funny, like you can laugh with them. How can you make a game that like tees you up for that and gives you that superpower? And I feel like we pretty much did that. I feel like it's a game where someone who's not very funny can do well. And someone who's a professional comedian, because of the rules of the game, you never know. You never know who's going to win. If somebody's funnier in that one moment, even if it's grandma, she might win out. So anyway, I'm pretty proud of it. I'm excited about Use Your Words 2 coming out.
Awesome. I can't wait to check it out. So you have this cross section of comedy, music, and video game development. Let's get into the musical. First, are you a Trekkie? What got you into Star Trek?
I am a Trekkie. I feel like I'm, it's important. I'm sure that you know this. Like, there's always someone Trekkier than you.
Oh,
so, like,
always.
I don't want to be
reference?
like, yeah, exactly. I don't want to be like, I'm an encyclopedia. But my parents watched like a little bit of TNG as a kid. So, like, I was familiar with Data and Picard, and I feel like pretty much everybody kind of knows, Spock and Kirk. But in 2009, they came out, the JJ movies came out, and I went and saw the first one, and I was like, okay, that was cool. And then sometime not long after that, they put all of the TOS movies on Netflix. And I just remember as a kid, like, I had a friend with the box set of VHS, like the first 7 Star Trek movies, and I never watched them. Like, I went over to his house once or twice, but the titles stuck with me as a child. The motion picture, The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, The Voyage Home, Final Frontier, and The Undiscovered Country. There's got to be a lot going on in these movies.
Yeah.
Like, there's something here, and it's really important, and I wish I could watch them. And so, like, I totally forgot about those until they came out on Netflix. And I think the Angry Video Game Nerd, who's, like, if you don't know, like, just a big deal in, like, video game YouTube history, made a video for Spike TV, RIP, about the Star Trek movies. And just, like, I just decided I wanted to marathon them. Wanted to marathon all of them. And what ended up happening is, even though not long after that I got into TNG and I watched all of Voyager, I watched a lot of DS9, I watched some of Enterprise, I dabbled in all of it. To me, to this day, the TOS movies are like my favorite sub-universe of Trek. Like, if you can consider them almost their own series, because nothing else is quite like them.
Yeah.
And you don't see a whole lot of content in the canon, maybe the beta canon, but they haven't really returned much to that period. It is its own thing. So I am a Trekkie, but the sort of chapter, the subgenre of Trekkiehood I know better than any other is movies 1 through 6.
Yeah, that's amazing. I would say why a Star Trek musical, but well, let me ask you this first. What other musicals that you've written have went into production, and why pivot to a Star Trek musical with this one?
Good question. Okay, so in high school, my drama teacher, I was writing like underscoring for plays that we would do. And she was like, look, I've got a script that I used for like a jukebox musical years ago. My drama teacher was telling me this. And jukebox musical, by the way, meaning you use songs that already exist and you put them into place in the script. That happens on Broadway a lot these days, but she did that in high school. She was like, what if you wrote music to make my musical or have an original soundtrack instead of using songs that are pre-existing? And I was like, okay. So I grabbed my best friend, Matt, and I was like, only if me and Matt can do it and write the music and lyrics. So we did. That was called Class of 65. It was kind of a Grease ripoff. It wasn't amazing, but I was 16 when I started writing it. It came out when I was 17. We did it at my school. I ended up then writing a one-act Christmas Carol musical. Then in college wrote Shades of Grey, not 50 Shades of Grey. This was 2005. This was like a kind of just like almost like a sketch show, like one song after another, just different kind of comedy songs. I wrote a satirical show called OUsical, the musical, that was a satire of my college, OU. Then had an off-Broadway show called I'll Be Damned, about a homeschooled kid that is trying to find a friend. And so the devil says, if you give me your soul, I'll find you a friend. Then it turns out the devil actually is a terrible judge of friendship. So they go on an adventure and learn about what friendship is. So that was off Broadway in 2010. And then it was kind of nothing for a long time because I was off doing YouTube and all of my music and lyrics juice was being used there. And to be honest with you, I'll Be Damned flopped in 2010. It didn't get very good reviews. I would say in retrospect, it wasn't really a script that was ready. And the director, who was very talented, wasn't probably the right director for that show. So it was a confluence of those two things, and it just didn't do well. So I think it was easy for me to go, okay, YouTube's making me money. Theater's making me sad. I'm out. I'll see you later. But after enough years of YouTube and getting burnt out on that, I went, wait a minute, aren't I like a trained musical theater writer? Like what? So it's 2015. I'm definitely starting to feel burnt out from YouTube because at that point, it's been 7 years since I got on the map. It's been 5 years since my first album came out. And as you know, just that content grind, especially when you're doing it mostly yourself, is difficult. And even if you're making enough money to get by, that's fine. But you don't always, you get to a point where you wake up and you go, do I like want to play a video game to take notes so that I can write funny lyrics to make the music into like a bluegrass version or a gospel version. Like what is this what my life is? Like, is this what I want to do? And you go, well, that's how I pay the bills. But eventually you get burnt out. So there I am in 2015 and I'm planting different seeds. I started a podcast that year that I did for 5 years. I, was going to be on a web series that fell through, but I was like planting all these little seeds of what my career became. Oh, that's also the year that Use Your Words, the video game I made, that I had the idea for that. So that was a year of like planting seeds for the future. And I went to this weird like modern dance show in Brooklyn. And I was kind of zoning out. There were these two men dressed as spacemen just doing this weird kind of dances. And I was just watching them going like, kind of look like Chekhov and Terrell from Wrath of Khan. And I just was like sitting there like, I mean, the show was fine, but I was just a little bit like zoning out and going, what would that even be like? That would be a really silly idea for a musical. But I just kept thinking about it. And, you know, sometimes when you ask like, why a Star Trek musical? I don't know. Like, why, you know, like I get a little bit obsessed with things sometimes. And I just couldn't shake the idea. My friend Alina Morgan is someone I had done a webcomic with, and she's a huge Trekkie. And so I was just talking about it back and forth with her, and I was like, okay, but if you did a parody of Wrath of Khan as a musical, like it would be better if there's like a reason why, like an in-universe reason, instead of it just being like a comedy version. And I was like, maybe it should be Q, you know, Q should be like retelling his version of how he remembers it. And she was like, no, because like Q could do anything and that would make it just feel kind of dinky. Like she was like, what if Data made a musical of the Wrath of Khan on the holodeck? And I was like, oh my God. Okay. And so to this day, she is listed as the co-conceiver of the show because even though like she has collectively written maybe, I don't know, 30 words worth of lyrics and script that stayed in the show, that idea centered the whole thing and continued to grow. Now, why a Star Trek musical? Once I zoomed out and thought about it, I went, okay, I'm at a point in my career where I want to go back to theater. I like the idea of taking what I've learned in musical theater writing, but also making nerds happy and doing nerd content. You know, it's not that it's manipulative, but if you learn how to make your audience happy, you learn what to do and what not to do. You learn that if you totally don't understand the fandom you're talking about, they will know. And you will sacrifice. It's almost like the people that could have been made most happy by what you do are made the most annoyed by the fact that they can tell that you're just doing it to make content. So I think I can take what I've learned doing Brentalfloss and do it with a slightly different fandom, but also just like make a good musical. And that it would be the kind of thing where it could be a continuation of the trajectory of what I've been doing, parody, nerd content, theater, in a new way that's new enough that it's exciting and doesn't feel like that burnout thing. It's more like, this feels like an exciting new journey I could take to explore sort of like a lot of the same stuff, but a lot of different stuff too.
Yeah, just the concept of Data being the one who has to remember or present what he feels happened in this scenario events. When you think about his journey to be a human or to be more human-like, I would say.
Right.
And him just taking things the wrong way. And honestly, that idea to itself, I could see the hilarity in something already. But yeah, that's such an awesome idea. And as far as how he recounts, and we don't have to get into too many details because, of course, we're going to go see it. I'm going to go see it. But getting into the details of how he recounts the events of the Wrath of Khan, I know he's probably looking through some history books or something to learn what happened. How closely do you stay on track to what's in the movie versus Data being Data and not completely understanding stuff that's going on?
It's an amazing question. Okay, so the events of the events of the movie are almost all represented in the show in order. However, you know, the rules of how you turn a movie into a musical, particularly on Broadway, a lot of times you just have to cut a bunch of stuff because a movie can have literally 300 different short scenes, and a musical, every time you change location, is money. So it's like, how can we do the content of 6 different scenes of the movie in this one location? So there's that, right? Like some stuff got cut. There's a scene in the movie where they go to the space station and it's very creepy, and there's a mouse that scares Bones, and then there's like dead bodies. And there was a scene for that in the original draft of the show. And eventually I just went, like the story can happen just fine if we find out in the scene after that happened, which is an old theater trick too. Is like, we can't really afford to show all that, so we'll have a character run on, like the guy in Antigone. It's like, this is an old Greek thing. Guy comes on and goes, "Oh my God, you should have seen it. All this stuff just happened that we can't afford to show you." But in this show, it's more like, we couldn't afford the 10 minutes to show you that, so we're going to tell you in a 30-second monologue, because the movie's 2 hours and 17 minutes or something like that, and they're not even singing. And song takes a long time. So it's like, make everything smaller, get to the point, so that then when you are singing your feelings, you have the space to do that at a normal, pace that takes. So, okay, answer to your question, pretty much the movie and its events are represented. But the way Data gets it wrong is this. I didn't mean to do this, but basically I was writing a show about ChatGPT. I was writing a show about, like, AI synthesis, because Data, the old Twitter joke about, like, we forced a bot to watch 1,000 hours of Olive Garden commercials or whatever it is. He says in the opening monologue, I forced myself to watch 1,000 hours of 20th century Earth musicals. So he has made a musical comedy out of the Wrath of Khan story, but he doesn't understand the ways in which he's borrowing tropes from classic musical theater. He doesn't know when they're really obvious or when they're a little bit too much of a stretch. Like, you may know the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and like, somehow his algorithm spits out Khan as kind of a Frankenfurter type character, but it makes sense because the first time we meet Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Brad and Janet are stuck and they really want to get out of there and they need help. And there's all these weirdos and there's a leader of the weirdos. Okay. So what is similar? Oh, wait, Chekhov and Terrell, 2 people just like Brad and Janet, stuck, need to get out in a place with a bunch of weirdos like Khan's hench people. There's a culty leader of them, Khan. So it's like, there's all these ways in which, and they're not all spelled out in the show, but ways in which Data, his algorithm in his head, his subroutine of playwriting synthesis is creating moments for musical theater that you already know that are subbing in. Like there's, if you know the show Chicago, there's a moment in Chicago where, Billy Flynn, the sleazy lawyer, is trying to get his, like his client out of trouble. And he says, I'll do all the talking. So she sits in his lap and he's the one singing, but she's mouthing the words like a ventriloquist dummy. Well, there's the moment in the movie Wrath of Khan where Chekhov is talking to the Genesis Space Lab team and he's clearly like under the influence of the brainworms and he's talking like in a way that's very not Chekhov-like. And then at the end of the scene, he presses the, end communication button and we see that Khan was sitting right there. So I'm like, oh, it's Chicago. Khan's going to just stand next to him and operate him. Khan's going to sing the song. Chekhov's going to mouth it. And it's just like Chicago. But it's like that's kind of the nature of the show, is that if you don't know musical theater, you're still enjoying fun tropes that have worked in other shows and work here, even if you don't get that joke. But if you do get the joke, you see how Data is kind of doing that AI thing where you can see what the AI is borrowing from.
Hallucinations,
yeah. And the thing, and in the big picture, the fact that The Wrath of Khan is not a funny story, but Data's trying to make it a musical comedy, also is part of how he gets it wrong, because tonally, it's not always following the tone of the movie, but that's part of the fun of it, is seeing it be slightly wrong, and that gives me just enough space to put parody stuff in there. For instance, I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but I don't really like the character of Kirk's son in the movie. I think he's not very charming. I think he's kind of like, I mean, R.I.P. for sure, but I just think like R.I.P. in real life and in the show. But anyway, but I just went, what would Data do with this? And what would a musical comedy do with this? And I went, oh, well, there's your Shatner impersonator. Like, the guy playing Kirk shouldn't be too Shatnery because that could get old, you know, when it's your lead character. But his son should be the one like, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't be your son. I'm nothing like you. Great. It's finding little points at which to, you know, to be like, what would a musical comedy do with this character? And how could that simultaneously feel like it's kind of in the concept of Data's show and therefore in universe? This whole thing kind of is in universe. But also from a perspective of a real audience member going to see a show, it's just a fun musical for them too. That's what, at every point, I'm trying to do both of those things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is this show for the Trekkie? Is it for the musical theater geek? Like, who is it for? Is it for both?
Sounds
like it is.
It is for both. But the thing is, any marketing person will tell you, don't say it's for everybody, because something that's for everybody is for nobody. But here's what I'll say. It's a fun, funny musical if you don't know Trek. If you do know Trek, there's a lot of things that will make you very happy and that will make you laugh very hard. It's a fun musical for Trekkies, even if you don't know musical theater. But if you do know musical theater, there's a lot of stuff that will make you happy and will make you laugh very hard. If you are a Trekkie who likes musicals, you may die, but you will die happy. And the thing is, you know, my favorite responses throughout the years, because I've been developing it since 2015. It's been performed for audiences since 2019. It's always the people that got dragged along. The you know, for instance, the girlfriend of the big, huge Trekkie nerd who she's never watched an episode, and she just goes, "Oh my God, I've never seen any Star Trek, and I loved this, and I'm bringing my friend." And the thing is, like, once I realized that was possible, because let me be clear, the first few drafts were way more in jokes, way less accessible, and what I realized eventually was like, I can do a thing if I try really hard where every Trekkie reference is either funny to anyone or it would work just fine as dialogue. Like, Kirk, like, what I mean is, if no one knew that it was a joke, it wouldn't seem like a total non sequitur. Because that happens a lot in parody, where like somebody watching who doesn't get the joke is like, I don't even know why they would say that. But like, Kirk has a speech when he decides to take command of the Enterprise, and he's like, you know, he's telling all the offstage cadets, part of being on the Enterprise is being the only ship in range of whatever the hell is going on today. And like, the thing is, that's true for Trekkies, but even if you're not a Trekkie, you kind of get the trope. You know what I mean? You get that, like, that's just a thing that happens in movies where somehow, you know, in Murder, She Wrote, somehow everywhere she goes, there's always a murder, you know? So anyway,
like, how
it's
are you
always
getting
trying
caught in all this?
Yeah, exactly.
Every episode.
Yeah. So like, that's sort of the balance I'm trying to strike. So to answer your question, who's it for? Well, I think that it's a really fun musical for anyone that can imagine themselves going to a musical and having an okay time. But there are things that if you know them, you can enjoy it. I'm not even sure the word is more, just more deeply, just like on a level that there are Easter eggs you're going to get. Might not even make you laugh. Might just make you go, oh, I know that. You know, that kind of thing.
Did you get it?
Right. Exactly.
I'll say right now that you have an amazing Kirk. It's fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, we're slowly working on demos that may at some point become an album. And even though, let me be clear, our Kirk in the current production is amazing. But since the early days of doing Con, all the demos and me figuring out how to sort of compose Kirk songs has been me doing the voice. So I will be on the album as to the extent that there might be one as Kirk. And thank you. It didn't just start that way. I had to figure out, like, what is the deal with this dude?
Let's talk about the cast real quick.
Sure.
And also just being in Fort Worth, which is where I am. How did you find your cast? And then we can go into like being in Fort Worth and kind of what that means for your show.
Yeah, okay, so I should say I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, born and raised Irving, Texas. Irving being, you know this, but not everybody else does, where the Cowboys used to play. That's about that, when I meet people that that aren't from Dallas Fort Worth. I just say I'm from where the Cowboys used to play. Anyway, so moved to New York, did all that, but in 2021 I joined a website called musicalwriters.com, and it's kind of a educational / social community of people who write musicals. And they were doing kind of a Shark Tank sort of thing where you submit your show and they pick one of the shows that gets pitched to produce as a reading. And a reading is like, a very scaled down basic version of a show that is rehearsed, but it's kind of like a rehearsed table read just to give an audience an idea of what the show is and to help the writer develop it. Because in musicals, if you can't really hear it with an audience, you don't really know what you have. Like, film can be similar. Where it's like if you're not sitting there watching the movie, you know the story you want to tell, but you don't know the movie you have. Anyway, so I won, and it was produced by Rebecca Lowry, who is now the CEO of musicalwriters.com in Dallas, actually in a suburb called The Colony, Lakeside Community Theater in The Colony. And so it was interesting kind of coming all the way back to Texas to do that. That was 2021. We kept in touch. And basically, musicalwriters.com is now becoming basically a company that will, they will help you develop your show from the very beginnings all the way to they will also produce shows they have helped to develop in full productions. And this is kind of a maiden voyage pilot program of that. And so it was a show that, Rebecca really liked. She's, by the way, the director, producer, and the music director. She's very good at wearing multiple hats. And as a composer, lyricist, book writer, I can understand that. So we get along. We understand each other. But so basically, we found a space. We were like, we really want to do this show. But then she got in touch with a theater, really a theater university. A university theater program. That's how we say it. Texas Wesleyan University, their theater program, basically wanted her to direct a show called Next to Normal, which is coming up later in the season. But she was like, I could do that. I'm also looking for a space to do this Star Trek show. And it was just one of those like right place, right time kind of things. They were like, we could host it at our space. You could cast it with professional actors. We could have some students in the crew. They get an education out of it. And so it all came together. So yeah, where did the cast come from? Well, basically we held an open casting call. A lot, because Rebecca's so in the theater community in Dallas, a lot of people she's worked with before tried out. So a lot of the people that ended up in it were kind of known quantities in the Dallas theater community, which I was kind of part of as a kid, but like, I interact with a little, or I intersect, I should say, with a little bit, but not entirely. But yeah, so we got this great cast of local actors. And I mean, in some ways, like, you never want to say something, you never want to make it sound like another cast was like less than, but I'll just say we have things I've never seen in this show coming out of this cast. We have lines I've always known were funny that, sometimes an actor does a line really poignantly and you go, I thought it was funny. Like, like they're moving me, but I thought it was funny, or something like that. But there are actors in the show that are making choices and doing things that I've never seen. And that's in a good way. Things that I always thought this line could sound that way, or I always thought there was a laugh here, and they're showing me how deep and rich the show can be. And, we did the show off Broadway in 2023. So this is the regional premiere, kind of itself a springboard to licensing, where I hope to be able to offer the show as something that can be done at an amateur or professional theater, where they buy the rights, they get the materials, they put it on. And this is sort of like the last stop for me before that. So to see actors showing me, in some cases, that I was right, showing me in other cases that there's a better way than I thought to do a certain part of the show, it's been a great, it's just been a great education for me in how different the show can be, one production to the next, while still always being the same show.
The show is going to take place here in Fort Worth on October the 24th through 27th. Then it's going to come back on October 31st through November the 3rd of this year, 2024, at Theater Wesleyan.
Yep.
And that's 1205 Brinkley Street, Fort Worth, Texas. Yeah, I can't wait to actually be in attendance myself. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your show. It's been really amazing getting to know you a little bit better, and I'm excited.
Thanks. Well, just for your viewers, I want them to know if they get tickets for the first weekend, we have a $10 off code, which is Boldly Go. All caps, Boldly Go. If you use that code at checkout for any show in the first weekend, it's $10 off your ticket. And Halloween, obviously, if you're a cosplayer, our show would be a fun place to come for Halloween. So if you want to do Halloween or November 1st, the code is #TrekOrTreat. Hashtag all lowercase Trek or Treat for $5 off a Halloween or November 1st ticket. We're really hoping to get a lot of people there. And so, okay, one last thing. I don't think Rebecca likes me saying this, but I've said this about use your words for years, which is my game that I made. And I'm going to say it about this. I am so confident in the show that if somebody were to buy a ticket and come to the show and not love it, I will personally refund you. I will PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, hit me up. It's that good. And, to me, that's been my philosophy. And if I can't say that, I'm not done with it yet. That's typically how I have felt about my projects. And this is really one of them. And this cast is like a lot of the reason why. Everybody working very hard, the students working very hard to make it a good show. So yeah, I hope to, and also I'll be at every performance. So
cool.
If you see a bald guy in the back biting his nails, that's me. Come say hi. I'd love to meet you.
Awesome, Brent. Thank you for your time, man. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you, Clarence.
You've been listening to the Discussing Network. Find out more at discussingnetwork.com.
Can I say that like shut up Wesley? I can just go shut up Clarence?